Hi everyone. Welcome to another one of Professor King's web teaches. Sorry, I've got a little hair stuck in there. I hope you can see me. I have to teach this one from my phone because I'm still waiting on my new computer after my old one died. So hopefully this all makes sense. You're not going to see much of my face in this web teach. I'm just going to point it toward the whiteboard and talk about a lot of the things that are up on Canvas this week in terms of PowerPoints, assignments, readings, so that you can really anticipate how to approach this novel and therefore how to approach not only your annotated bibliography assignment, but also your final research essay. So I'm just going to start, go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and point this toward the whiteboard and go over what all of this means. I'll probably go in sections here so that you can, so I'm not pulling my phone all the way back and so that it makes sense. But this is sort of an introduction to Adichie's novel, Americanah. The first thing I want you to think about is sort of a pre-reading strategy, right? We're beginning the novel, and I'm going to talk about what the beginning of a novel is called, or narrative, I should say, a work of literary fiction, what that is called, and what we should look out for when we're beginning to read, especially, a piece of writing of this size. So first off, as you're reading, and as you're dipping your toe into the vast Americana ocean, I want you to think about think about topics that you're seeing in the novel, and think about how you can relate them to what we've studied, where you're seeing that, if you can, where you're seeing that happen. So if you're noticing things that have to do with gender, or things that have to do with post-colonial theory, or race, or immigration, how hair might reflect some of those ideas, or love and relationships, or religion, or anything else. You don't have to limit to these. If other ideas of yours are coming up, think about how that functions in the work, what role it has. Why, if Adichie is the writer and she is creating deliberately this piece of writing to construct an argument about any of these given topics and more, what's the argument she is making and how is she achieving that? Another thing you'll want to check out, because it's required of this week, sorry, you can see my foot, that's weird, is Adichie's TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story, and that is up on Canvas for you to view. I would like for you to look at that in conjunction with the biographical research notes. Those can be found under Types of Research, the PowerPoint that I posted to week 12. So read those, just the biographical research notes for this week, and maybe the intertextual research notes if you want to, get ahead, and think about how knowing what you know about Adichie's life from The Danger of a Single Story, how that might inform your reading of the novel. So that's part one. Since we're talking about research, I'll bring it to part two, which is not only thinking about the research you do outside of a reading, but think about annotations and highlights and underlines and putting words in boxes. All of that you're doing when you read any piece of writing, like we've been doing all semester, is research. It's research within the text, right? The research that you do outside of the text is what we've been learning, right? But as readers, as writers, we're always doing research whenever we find out something new. So one way that you can build research in the text is by building a notes and quotes page, either on your phone, on your computer, laptop, or in a notebook. And all you need to do is create like a new page and title it Notes and Quotes Americanah. And then as you can see, what I did is you put the page number first, and then put essentially just like the first couple of words of the quote. You've probably highlighted it or underlined it or put a sticky note next to it so that when it's time to go back to writing the essay, you'll have that right there to reference, to use as a source in your essay, right? And then in parentheses, I always like to just make sure you know the character who said it. If it's Ifamilu, Abinze, the narrator, whoever, right? So start building a notes and quotes page, and as you're reading, again, just jot down the page number and just like the first couple of words in the quote so that you know where to find them, so that when it comes time to writing that essay, you have them at the ready. And one thing you might say is like, but Professor King, I don't even know what I'm going to write my essay on yet. That's fine. But what you start to see when you highlight, when you annotate, is and especially when you do it for a larger work, you start to see that your mind, your heart, your brain, your critical thinking mechanism is drawn to certain ideas. It's making certain patterns of its own, right? Maybe you have parents who are immigrants, and so the issue of immigration is something you keep highlighting or underlining in the text. Maybe you care a lot about toxic masculinity or about internalized misogyny, and those ideas keep coming back to you as you read this text, and you're highlighting passages that remind you of that. Maybe you don't know yet, and maybe those patterns will emerge as you read. But whatever the case, the stuff that's sticking out to you, it's not a bad idea to have, especially if it's a Word document or your Google Doc, to have that quote at the ready. Because again, when we get to writing the essay, that's one less thing you got to scramble and look for. And again, in terms of outside research outside of the novel, start thinking about evaluating sources. Review the CRAP test and the types of research PowerPoints, particularly the CRAP test. One thing I noticed with Essay 2 is a lot of us are still using Google sources, and we have to get out of that habit. I know it's a little bit more challenging because we're living in a post-COVID-19 world, and not all of us, none of us have access to libraries at the moment, this being, April 20th, 2020 as I'm filming this. But what we do have is still access to the Fullerton College Library online. And we do have access to the LibGuide that was posted that I shared with you a few weeks prior. And those have great resources for things like not just the library website, but ebooks, right? Access to reliable materials. So what you need to do is you need to review the CRAP test notes and then get out that little CRAP test rubric file that you see under week 12. And as you're looking up outside sources, when we get to the annotated bibliography, and I'll talk more about this later, you'll want to start thinking, is this source reliable? Is this going to be helpful for my essay? I think I used this example in class before, but think of it this way. Like, let's say you have a piece of writing that discusses climate change. And you might have all these feelings and all of these, you might be in agreement with 95% of what that piece of writing has to say. But what if you found out that it was written by a fifth grader? And a fifth grader who has maybe a fourth grade level of learning? You wouldn't trust that piece as much, even if you agreed with everything, because you want to make sure that the research that you're gathering is being done by people who've been doing the work for years and years and years, not people who are unqualified, right? But people who know what they're talking about. And a lot of times when we go on Google, we miss that, right? We miss that because a lot of the writing that you'll find on Google, particularly those kind of web pages where the topic is exactly the title of the web page, right? Like wellness for women in their 20s or something like that. Those aren't helpful because those people are writing those pieces not for the pursuit of scholarly knowledge, but for money, right? To generate ad revenue and to make it as simplistic as possible for a mass audience. You want the research that's challenging. You want the research that's done by experts. So make sure you look through those CRAP test PowerPoint notes. You use that CRAP test rubric when you're looking up sources, and you avoid Google and Wikipedia at all costs. So that ends this second part on not just research in the text, in the novel, but outside of the novel, which we will talk about in much greater detail as we go. But the last part, since this is the beginning of the novel, I want to share with you this little chart here is a chart on the plot, right? The plot of typically most works of narrative fiction. I can't say all. People always like to bend the rules, right? But if we think about plot, this is how the majority of plot in literature and film and drama not poetry, because it's not told as in narrative form, but in novels and short stories, how plot goes, right? You have the first part of plot, which is the exposition. And if you see the root word in there, it's expose. And that's exactly what is happening. You're being exposed to the characters, the setting, background information that you need to know. So that's the very first thing the writer does, is expose you to these elements. Again, only what's absolutely necessary to move the plot forward. Then we have some sort of catalyzing event. And what that means is a catalyst, just like in biology, it's the thing that gets things to start moving faster, right? To start going, to start having a chain reaction, if you will. And so the catalyzing event is not the biggest event in the story usually, but it's the thing that starts to move the plot forward into the rising action. And the rising action comprises a series of plot points that lead us to the main sort of event in the novel, the point of no return, which is the climax. The climax is the no going back point, to think about it in those terms. And that's not always necessarily a bad thing, but it's the main event of the novel in that either everything changes, some major event happens, an epiphany, right, a loss, a gain, what have you, but after the climax, right, there's no going back to the time before the climax in the novel, in the short story, etc. Okay? Then after the climax, you have the falling action, which is the action that takes place as a result of that event, and it's going to start leading us toward the ending of the piece of literature, in which we start to have some sort of understanding. That's known as the resolution or the denouement. Now, it looks like denouement, but it's denouement. And that's where, a lot of people will say the quote unquote moral of the story. And that kind of makes my skin curl when I hear my skin crawl, my hair curl. When I hear that, because not all writers want to have morals to their story, but they do want the reader to leave that piece of writing, that piece of fiction, that piece of narrative, thinking about something and seeing how some sort of issue was resolved, wasn't resolved, and what that means, right? What the takeaway is. Why am I telling you this? Because we're in chapters 1 through 5 right now of the novel, and so we are in the exposition. We're finding out about these people, right? It doesn't mean that all their lives start from day one. It doesn't mean we're all looking at them as babies and see their lives. It's starting at some point in their lives. And again, we get enough background information to know about them as characters, but we are being exposed to the places where this novel is going to be set, the people who are going to be, or I should say the characters who are going to be major players, and again, the background that we need to know. So some of those are like Ifemilu, right, our main character, Obinze, the United States, Nigeria, etc. So again, pay attention to those things. Pay attention to topics and ideas related to the novel that we've studied in class. Pay attention to what we're still working on in terms of the danger of a single story and the types of research notes, the CRAP test, and start building your notes and quotes page. I promise you, if you do this kind of work smarter, not harder approach, it's going to pay off in dividends when it's time to write that research essay. So keep that all in mind. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I will see you in cyberspace. All right, bye.